Hello, thank you for joining the 5 Minute Bible Study in the book of Colossians. Today we're going to do a summary on verses 3:18 through 4:1. You'll notice that is one thought. Even though it goes into chapter 4, the people who broke the Bible up into chapters and verses, they don't always get those breaks in the right place. And this is an example of where they made the wrong break. So they've broken too early, they've broken in the middle of Paul's thought, but we're going to go ahead and read right through that chapter break and read through verse 1 in chapter 4. Now, when you do that, you're going to notice that Paul has changed his tone and his talking points. Earlier in verses 12 through 17, we saw Paul was talking about the behavior of the church, what the attitudes and behavior of a church would be. He was talking about basically the spiritual family that we all belong part of. We are sisters and brothers in Christ. And he was talking about what that looks like and how we interact with each other in that. But now he's going to take it to the next step and say, I'm not going to talk about the spiritual family, but let's talk about the physical family. So from verse 18 through 4:1, we're going to see what the physical family looks like. The physical family looks a little different in Paul's time than it does today. Today we think of mom, dad, and kids. Maybe once in a while we'll throw grandma and grandpa in there. But typically that's the family. But back in Paul's day, there would have been an addition to that. It would have been husband and wife, mom and dad, and children, but it also would have been and slaves, household servants, if you would, or slaves, either way. And so that would have been the family unit, that whole group. So when we see what Paul says, we're going to see that there's three parts, there's three pairs. The first pairing is going to be husband and wife, because that's the most important pairing. The second pairing is going to be parent and children, because that is the second most important parent. And the third parent is going to be masters and slaves. Now remember, the masters would have been the husband and wife. So it's really the husband and wife and their servants and their slaves in the household. And that would have been considered the family unit at that point. So Paul's going to show us what that looks like in terms of how does that family unit submit to the Lord. Because remember, at the end of the previous section, at the end in verse 17, we are told that everything we do and everything that we say, we should do it unto the Lord. In other words, that we should submit ourselves to Jesus. And if he says to do this, we should do it. And if he says to think this, we should think it. And if he says to say this, we should say it. Because we submit ourselves unto the Lord. And in verses 12 to 17, the context was in a church environment. But now Paul wants us to understand that not only in a church environment are we to submit ourselves to the Lord, but in the family environment we're supposed to submit ourselves to the Lord. Which brings us to the point that we have two nasty words in these sections. In today's society, we don't like that word submit, and we don't like that word slave. So let's talk about those two things really quickly. When we think about slavery, we recognize that slavery is very antithetical to the Bible. The Bible is very clear that there are no slaves or masters, that there are no male or female, there's no Greek or Jew. The Bible is very clear that we are all one. And so this concept of slavery doesn't quite fit the Christian biblical concept of humanity. And the answer to that is yes, that's true. But it doesn't change the fact that in those days, slavery was normal. In fact, slavery has been normal throughout all mankind, going all the way back. Remember Moses and the Israelites in Egypt. That was 400 years of slavery for the Israelites. So slavery has been going on since way back, since the beginning of mankind. It's only very recently that that's gone away. Thank God for the United States and the United Kingdom that got rid of the concept of slavery and recognized how evil it was. So since then, slavery has kind of gone away because we've been able to affect the world with that Christian mindset of slavery is not good, we are all one. But Paul doesn't ignore the fact that there's slavery, so he wants to make sure that as there is slavery, that they are treated properly and that they treat their masters properly. So as far as submission is concerned, submission is a little different. We are still called to submit. We are still called to submit to God. We are still called to submit to each other in Ephesians 5:21. We're called to submit to others, that we think of others more important than ourselves, right? And we see that throughout the Bible. In fact, when Jesus, one of the last things Jesus did was he washed the disciples' feet, and he said, "I've served you, now go serve others." And so we are called to be submissive. And if you want probably a better word in English today, to that word submissive is humility or humbleness. So we are called to be humble. We are called to have humility. We are called to humble ourselves under Jesus, under our Lord, and we're called to humble ourselves under those of authority, whether that be the government or whether that be in our businesses and work, or whether that be in our families. So that's what we're going to see as we go through verses 18 through 4:1. We're going to see how these three pairs of family relationships react and interact. We're going to see how we, as a family, we are called to submit ourselves to the Lord as a family. So we saw how we do it as a church. Now we're going to see how we do it as a family. So with that, we're going to be going through some touchy things when we talk about slavery and submission. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, I know I always say to put comments in, and you're more than welcome to put comments in, but if there's comments about specifically about the male and female role, about submission, about slavery, hold off on those if you could until we get to those parts when we go through 3:18 through 4:1. And if in those areas we haven't clarified that a little bit, then go ahead and put those questions in there. But I'm going to ask if you can just hold off on that for now. This is just a summary of what we're about to talk about. And I don't want to bog us down before we even get to the subject matter. So with that, if you have any other kind of questions or any thoughts or comments, go ahead, put them in the comment section below. Thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, and God bless you.